G'day and welcome to All About Branding. I'm your host, Frank. Welcome to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, you're listening on the podcast, or you're streaming right now on Instagram Live. G'day and welcome. I'm your host, Frank, as always, and I'm here to talk all about branding. As a bit of a recap of last week, if you caught my silliness on Instagram, you would have seen a lot of reels on there, making all different fun things for my fellow creatives. It's that week off I have in between All About Branding, the content. It's kind of a creative masterclass. It's a bit of everything. Catch it there, live and free, as they say in television land. I'm from TV land. But we're here today to talk about a new topic all about branding, and I've centered on personal branding. It's something that I don't typically offer my clients. I typically work with businesses as a collective voice to develop their identities. So I want to give this to you, this freebie to you. It is in an article form. It is now in a YouTube form, and it will be in a podcast form. That's where you're listening to it now, I would imagine, if you're on a podcast or watching this live on Instagram. And I want to start by saying that it turns out that we all have a personal brand, no matter where you come from, what your background is, what it is you do. It's there. Intentional or unintentional, we have a personal brand. And there are three key factors that define how we are identified as individuals: to be differentiated, to be distinctive, to be remembered, to be recognized, identified differently from others. And I'll come back to those things in terms of what identifies you differently to others. But in terms of personal branding, it's a bit of a fancier, fluffier word for your identity. We all have an identity. We all look a certain way. We all speak in a certain way. And we all have certain things and beliefs and ideologies and a story behind what has made us who we are. And in terms of this, it's up to us to discover and lean into what makes us us, to develop something that's intentional. So in terms of personal branding, the way I see it differently from just your average identity, I'm not saying you're average, you're probably above average, you're amazing. But in terms of the distinction between, I think, identity and personal branding, is that we can say personal branding is the intentional act of developing something that people can connect with, be it clients, be it customers, be it your audience on your social media platforms, whoever it might be, your mum, who knows. But something that's intentional that people can remember you by, people can recognize you and then want to connect with you, is something that I see as personal branding. Because there's a lot of things you can do to amplify what your identity is at its core, or to lean into a few things that will help you in terms of discovering it, developing it, designing it, and then distinguishing yourself from others. And that's a lot of D's. A lot of D's there. Just wait till we get to the C's and the S's. And no, there's no cuss words there, don't worry. But in terms of what we want to do here, I did mention 3 steps of developing your personal brand. And you'll know exactly what they are when I come to them. But I want to pose you this question first. And it's a really hard question, I guess, because it's something you might not have thought of too much about. You just kind of exist and you be, and you hope people recognize you for something. But what do you want to be most known for? You know, or what are you going to be most known for? If you're in the planning phase now, what are you going to be most known for in the near future? Let's say the near future rather than the long-term future. But you have a goal, obviously, when you're developing a personal brand. What do you want to be most known for, so you can make it easier for others to connect with you? Now, in terms of those 3 steps of understanding what you're going to be most known for, it's probably going to come down to these 3 things. Maybe one of these or a combination of the 3 things, but they are your soul, your sound, and your sight. In context of business branding, the way I do it with my clients, the soul is your brand direction. Some call it your strategy. I call it a direction. It's where you're going. It's things like your values and your purpose and your mission and your vision, things like that. Then there comes your sound, and sound in the business context is your brand messaging. So it's like your tagline, your tone of voice, the personality you have as a team, things like slogans you could use for your marketing and advertising, and your brand story. It's very, very similar if you put it into the context of you. And then in terms of the third one, sight, it's pretty obvious. It's what we can see. We're visual creatures. We can see, if you're fortunate enough to have and be gifted with two eyes, you have 20/20 vision or not, it allows us to be recognizable on the shelf, in person as someone walks past, whatever it might be. And for a business brand in that context, it's things like your logo, your colors, your fonts, any other graphics and photos that are associated with how you market your business to others so that people can identify you, recognize you, remember you, all those fun things. In terms of you, it's similar, but we don't necessarily need a logo. And I'm going to come back to this whole thing. The premise of the article that I wrote at the start of this week was that you don't need a logo to develop your personal brand. I think it's very true. It's not a necessity, nor is actually making an intentional personal brand. But if you do want to connect with your consumers on a deeper level or a more intentional level to get in front of them and help you be known for something, so that makes it easier for them to connect with you and know what you're about and what you're into and what you're offering, then that's what we're doing. So in terms of soul, sound, and sight, let's break them down. But before I do, I want to give you 3 examples. And if you're watching here on YouTube, I'm going to share my screen here of what I've got going on. Here we go. So I'm going to share this one here. This bloke here, his name is Gary Vaynerchuk. You might know him as Gary V. He's everywhere and anywhere on social media. He's the guy that tells you to get on TikTok or make LinkedIn ads, make a podcast, all those fun things. But he has a interesting personal brand that is removed from his business brands. He is the owner of VaynerMedia, Vayner Sports. I think he might be still part of Empathy Wines, Resi, all these different businesses that he has built and grown and a part of. And he has associations with K-Swiss, and he's just an animal. But in terms of his personal brand, the way we recognize Gary V is very identifiable. You know, if you know Gary at all, you see his content. Apart from his stature, I think he's not a tall man, but his stature, his face, his appearance, the clothes that he wears, the K-Swiss shoes that he wears, black shirt, grey jeans, kind of nearly what I wear actually. And he turns up and he has his mannerisms, his hand signals, putting up the 5 when he takes a photo with people. And then his kind of brash nature, very to the point, very much there for his audience, very intentional in connecting with them on their level, mirrors them. And you see that difference when he connects with different kinds of people. If it's people that have had unfortunate kind of upbringings and they maybe from the ghettos or something like that, he gets down on their level and speaks their vernacular, or he goes into a boardroom with real stiffo business people and mirrors their personalities and their characteristics in terms of the language that they would use. But in terms of him, you come back to him in his story and his upbringing in the former Soviet Union in Belarus. His family immigrates out of that war-torn country to New York. His father starts a liquor business. He helps his father grow that business into what it has become today. And there's that influence of what has shaped his identity, what makes his personal brand. And the way he only, I guess, uses his personal brand in the context of creating anything visually apart from what he wears is maybe his signature. And I think a lot of individuals can be noted by their signature, and that be, I guess, the equivalent maybe to a logo, if it's not your face, the money maker there. Now, in terms of other people that you might see out there, is this lady, again on YouTube, if you can see this. I'm talking about Oprah Winfrey. She is an individual that has buckets of personal brand connection that you can have on a personal level with her. Growing up in a very unfortunate life, her mother had her when she was very young. She was abused when she was a young woman. She grew up in the streets in a very poor neighborhood, and she is now a beacon for others that might have had a very similar upbringing and story and hardships in life to become successful and see that path. And there's a story there that you can connect with emotionally, empathetically, no matter who you are. And then we all identify by all these different characteristics, the big verbose personality, the big hair, no matter what kind of year she's in, the fashion, and the way that she gets down on people's levels to communicate with them in her own way that is very iconic. You could hear, if you closed her voice, if you closed your eyes and listened to her voice, you'd pick her up in a heartbeat. She's very identifiable, and that has come from showing up time and time again for her audience over decades. And that has built up that personal brand and obviously commercialized it just like Gary has. And these people are a figurehead for their businesses, so that way it gives their audience or their customers, their clients, a way to connect with them. The other example that you'd all, I would imagine, know is the late Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, the figurehead person. If you thought of one person that was Apple, what made Apple, you would think of this man, even though hasn't been with us for over 10 years now. Steve is one of those people, I guess, that whenever Apple was on the stage, he was there. He was the person that gave us 1,000 songs in our pocket. He gave us a phone, an internet communication device, and a music player all in one thing, which was the iPhone. He's who gave us the Mac. I'm using so much of that technology right in front of me now to deliver what I am delivering here. But for him, it was that kind of personal belief and purpose that drove technology into the hands of the everyday person to meet in the middle there and not make it something that's complex. I remember using an Apple computer when I was in primary school. I think it was one of the first computers I'd probably used. And I think that affinity that we've all kind of grown to has maybe because we've connected with that person, whether or not you like him or not, or liked him or not. He was a very brash man, very to the point, and he probably rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, even in his personal life. But there are these elements as well that we can visually recognize that man, if it's the long flowing hair when he was younger, or the shaved head and stubbly beard that he had in his later years. But most iconically, the black skivvy, the turtleneck shirt that he wore day in, day out, and the Daggy Dad blue jeans and massive, Daggy sneakers. It was identifiable. His glasses along with it. And then obviously holding up the device, makes it a package deal that is associated with Apple. And he's that face to the brand. There are many others like it that allow you to connect with a business based on their personal brand, to be the figurehead person. Other people at the moment you see is Elon Musk, Richard Branson. Even if they aren't directly involved day to day in the operations of everything going on, they're that draw card that brings people into those brands. No matter if you love them, you hate them, you might be polarizing, you might be amazing, you might be the loveliest person on the world, whatever. But that's who we connect with. We connect with better with people rather than with faceless brands and simple logos. So this is why we want to try and develop our personal brands. But what does that involve? So I mentioned soul, I mentioned sound, and I mentioned sight. Now, in terms of these three things, what we're doing here is just looking at the bare basics of what makes us us. In terms of our soul, it's things like our purpose. So what, how, and why do we do the things that we do? Why are we interested in them? Why do we get up out of bed every day to do them? What do we want to share as a result of that? And then things like our values and beliefs. What's our moral compass effectively? It could be religious beliefs as well. It could be all these different things that we want to do. I just need to switch my screen here, bring you up to me. And from there, we can understand what kind of behaviors we might have, what we like doing, what we dislike doing, why we choose to do one thing over the others in life. And then we can also add a story in here. Wherever you came from, life experiences that you've had along the way, that got you to this point and is where you're going kind of next, which is where it leads into things like your goals. Where are you headed? Now, story in there again is another S word. I've given you 3: soul, sound, and sight. Story could be one of its own, but I'm going to give you 3 there just to try and make it as easy as possible to remember. But if we move on to the sound, much like a business brand's identity, it's very similar. We're creating a tone of voice. How do you communicate in terms of your accent? I have an Australian accent. If you are not from Australia, you'll hear it. Communicating with others like you in your own accent, you won't hear that accent because it's just part of your ear and that sound. When I lived overseas in England for a year, I could really tell an Australian accent very quickly because I was starting to get attuned to an English accent in a very short amount of time. But your accent is part of you. And for me, I lean into that. I use the different terminology that Australians use, very ochre language, very laid back kind of language, and things that just don't make sense. So I'm sorry if I've ever confused you. It's the energy you deliver in that voice too. Adding a little bit more is okay. Don't go too far, I guess. It's the loudness that you use. I had a lady that I used to work with. She was my boss at my former job, and she had this. She was very loud, but no discredit to her at all. It's what made her her. And she had this amazing laugh as well. I didn't find it annoying at all, but you could hear it from a mile away. And we worked on the second floor, like the top floor of our office, and we had a stairwell that was usually open so that you could, get up and down the flights of stairs in the building. And she'd be on the bottom floor, and her laugh would echo throughout that whole staircase up onto our floor, and you just knew she was coming, back from lunch or something. You're like, oh, there she is. She's on her way. Okay, good. Then it's your character. How do you show up in terms of what kind of individual are you? Are you that happy kind of person? Are you a fairly serious person? Are you quite dynamic and an energetic kind of person? Are you just like the life of the party? Are you a little bit more introverted and quiet? Lean into those things. Don't feel like you need to be something else that you're not. That's okay. And it's very similar to your personality in terms of your emotions that you have, what you respond to, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what makes you fired up. And then that aura and presence that you have, which is hard to articulate, I guess. And it really comes down to asking maybe others what they feel around you. Are you a calming presence? Are you someone that lifts other people up just by being near you? All these kind of things is what makes your personality somewhat identifiable if you are present in real life. I mean, over Zoom calls and things and Instagram lives and YouTube live streams, it's a little harder to communicate those things. But in how you deliver it, it can be an aid to it, which is where your vernacular comes in, using certain words and phrases that you commonly use. I mean, for me, the big ones are say g'day today. I say that a lot, or I say at least g'day to introduce myself. And this can also be things like elevator pitch, introducing yourself to others of who you are, what you do and why. If you can deliver that confidently, it gives a lot of other people, the confidence to want to sit up and listen rather than you telling some weird roundabout story of what you've been up to in the last year, and everyone gets bored and no one really cares. And you're just like, okay, well, why do I bother speaking? Having these things time and time again that you can bring up and just nail every time makes it so much easier to communicate so that people understand who you are, where you're from, what you do, where you're going, why they should care. The last part to it is your body language and any other kind of eccentricities that are akin to you. I did mention that laugh before of my former colleague. Gestures that you have. I try to use my hands a bit just to communicate some extra like energy to how I speak. And isn't just sort of boring where I have my hands, down to my side. I find that boring. To you, it might not be. But communicate in that way. So it's not just sound in terms of what comes out of your mouth or any other orifice on your body, but it's how you deliver that personality that makes you you. The third part is your sight. Plain and simple, your face, facial features. I mean, look at this guy. He's got a beard. He's got, what have I got? Hazel eye color, brown hair. It's real curly. It's under a hat today. It's having no hair. You might be bald. You might wear a wig. I wear a wig sometimes. Lady Frank, hello. It's your body shape. If you're thin, if you're a bit wider, if you carry some weight, embrace these things. Don't feel ashamed that you need to be one type or another. It could be your skin color as well, the background that you have. Again, it gets a little vain here in terms of those things, but these are the things that we identify one another by. We differentiate ourselves from others to be recognizable. It's not saying that you have to differentiate yourself because, well, I'm white, then, I'm different. It's like, no, that's not it. The last part to it is one that you can really influence, apart from cutting your hair or cutting your beard off or something like that, is the clothing and accessories you have. If it's jewelry, I wear a watch, an Apple Watch. There you go. There's another Apple product. I paint my fingernail pink. You might have seen on my stories on Instagram. I just did a re-go at it today. You might have tattoos. You might wear glasses, a hat. I've got a Rode Microphones hat on here because they're an Australian brand. Why not support them? And that can form that visual identity, which is in the business branding kind of context. But for you in a personal brand, that site, what people can see, can be that identifiable feature for them to remember you by. It might be one thing. It might be that you always wear, a certain type of glasses. It might be the certain type of clothing that you wear. You might wear the same kind of shirt every day. When I'm showing up on social media, I'm showing up with a black shirt, either with my logo on it. You can kind of see it there, the GF logo, for my business, or some other kind of print on there. That's how I'm showing up in terms of site. Now, what do you do with this personal brand identity? Using those 3 S's is totally up to you how you use it. Some are inherently part of you, as I've kind of said throughout this whole thing, while others are a bit more engineered. The pink fingernail right there, that means a lot to me. It might not mean a lot to you, but if I told you the story behind it, it would make a whole heap of sense. It's not just leaning into my G'day Frank brand color. But what you can do with this is, in terms of rubber meeting the road, if you will, is that I'm going to throw another S at you. This is kind of like the 4th part to it, but it's not, I guess, necessary to really lean into. If you don't want to, you can always just have your personal brand and not show up. So the 3rd S is show, but the full kind of phrase is to show up. In terms of what I mean by show up, it's where people will find you. If it's in-person events, if it's on Instagram, if it's on a podcast, YouTube, LinkedIn, an email newsletter, a website that you have, a community group you have, whatever it might be, it's up to you how you show up in that way. But then it's how you're going to show up. Is it going to be with video? Is it going to be with audio? Is it going to be written? Is it going to be photos? Is it going to be in person? And then ultimately, the last part of sharing, which is most important, is what are you going to share with others? Are you going to educate people? Are you going to entertain people? Are you going to funnel them to what it is you offer as a business? If you're the figurehead of a business, you're the owner, or you're the social media manager of a business, whatever it is, what are you going to filter that person towards to get engaged with, to be that figurehead? For me, it's showing up on all these different platforms to funnel people to get to know me a little bit more, add some value with some understanding about branding, throw a bit of creativity in there. But ultimately, it's to give clients the confidence in me to then maybe want to work with me in terms of building and developing their brands. So if you look at these 3 things, the 3 things I mentioned, the soul, the sound, and the sight, mixed with showing up, you get something like this. And I'm going to show this on YouTube. You can look at it on the article on my site. But in terms of this, it looks like this little diagram, and it's kind of like a loudspeaker, I guess. It's like a reverse funnel going into another funnel. So on one side, you've got soul, sight, and sound. Soul, sound, and sight, filtering down into one thing, and then out to how you show up So it's like acting like that loudspeaker to tell everybody, this is me, this is what I do, this is who I am, and here I am showing up. And if you show up time and time again consistently with all these things in tow, that's going to help people recognize you. It's going to help people remember you, and then know why and what you're remembered for most. So that way, when they think of needing someone like you or what it is you offer, they think of you. They put that person's face in their minds, which hopefully is you, that they need most, that they turn to, they trust, and they've been given some value as a result of it, or been entertained, been educated, been inspired, whatever it is, so that when the time is right to need what it is you have to offer, they think of you. It's the same with a business. But for you especially, they can turn to you as that person. But also at the same respect is it's getting to, I guess, know you, so that if you are the face of your business, they know who they're going to be getting involved with in business. You know, for me, I don't hide behind a logo because I want someone to know who they're going to be doing business with from the start, so that if they don't gel with who it is I am, then it's probably not going to be a good thing in terms of the working relationship that follows therefore after. So this is where showing up can be a really good, I guess, icebreaker, without having to feel like you're pitching yourself or anything like that. People can observe you from afar. I've had a lot of people of late that have followed me for maybe a year, finally send me a message and say, hey man, I've been following you for a year. I really love what you're putting out there. It's either made me laugh, it's taught me something. I've just really liked following along with the content. It's made sense to me. Now I have a need for maybe your services. How about it? It just always baffles me that they haven't got in contact sooner. It's not like I want to sell to them straight away. I'd like to get to know people, or at least let them get to know me. And that's why you show up, I guess, on social media with that kind of intention, without, I guess, the necessity of saying, okay, I need money out of you. That's not the right intention, I think, with branding. So with that, I'm going to come back to this idea of no logo required. You really don't need a logo to develop your personal brand. You really don't. I mean, I use, here it is. I use my business's logo to lean into, just to help people identify that and make those connections. I use the pink, like it's going out of fashion. I'll use the same fonts just so that there is those ties to my business. But at the end of the day, you're communicating with me, not my logo. My logo doesn't speak back to you. Maybe that's an idea for a reel or a TikTok video. Just my logo starting to speak. Anywho, there is a couple of caveats though to creating a logo, because I don't want to rain on your parade here. If you do have a logo, or you're thinking of creating a logo for yourself, it might be just the 2 letters of your name, your first name and last name, to make some kind of emblem or some kind of what is that word? Some kind of symbol. It's not coming to me off the top of my head. It'll probably pop into my head after this. But to create something that represents you as an individual, that's totally fine. It could even be your signature, like Gary Vee uses with his content. But there's 2 caveats to this, I guess, in terms of what I'm saying that you don't need a logo, is that if you decide to commercialize your personal brand into a product or maybe a service, you know, it could be a training course, that you're giving all this free value away, and then you want to commercialize it into something that people want to buy or buy into, or it could be a product range of things. Have at it. I mean, that's where you do want to put your stamp on things so that people can recognize it, because you're not just going to have your face on it. It might get a little bit tacky if you do that, especially if it's a product. Imagine buying like a water bottle and then it's got your face on it. I mean, I'd like to see it, but but I don't think others probably would, and probably wouldn't buy it as a result. Some examples of people that typically do commercialize their personal brands: sports stars. You'll have watched maybe the Australian Open of late here in Australia. The winner of that competition this year, Rafael Nadal of the men's draw, he has his own logo developed along with Nike, so that any kind of sweatbands, because that man needs a sweatband, shorts that you can pull your undies out of your bum with, tennis balls, rackets, all that kind of merchandise that is Rafa, is branded like that. I'm sure Serena Williams probably has the same thing. I know Roger Federer has his RF logo that comes to mind. But it commoditizes what you have to offer so that people can obviously buy into you, but then have something at least that you can brand those commercial products as a result of that. So it makes it identifiable without needing to put your face on it. The second caveat, and there's probably more to this, these are the two ones that really spark a big sort of flag here, is that if you believe a logo and the colors and other assets that aren't part of your business already, that you are a figurehead of, if you want to develop them or you have them, and they give you the added confidence to put your brand out there into the ether, to show up for others to connect with, please don't let what it is I've said here poo-poo that. I don't want to pour cold water over what you have, because I'm effectively doing that. It's just not bespoke to what my business is. If I showed up in cyan blue like I used to, it'd be a bit of a different story. So it can make an impact. It can help people recognize you quickly, especially stopping the scroll. On something like Instagram especially, you've got things like your social media profile image. You might have a headshot and then a certain key accent color behind you. I'm also just I'm just totally getting out of track here. If you're on YouTube here, you'll know what I've just done there. I'm just switching screens. But it makes you identifiable to stop that scroll so people can recognize you by that color. That's really helpful in getting that person's attention really quickly. Same thing in your content too. If you use certain colors in that and you're really intentional about that, or you might have a certain wash or grading to your photos and a certain kind of color or hue, then this can really add to the consistency of you showing up in context. Now, to finish up here, can I help you develop your personal brand? I don't think so, to be perfectly honest. I find it quite challenging to be honest with you. The hardest part of developing a personal brand is excuse me. I'm going to take a sip of water. The hardest part is the brand messaging aspect, to try and capture your tone of voice as an individual rather than as a collective entity of people, or how you're trying to communicate with others as a business. I find really quite challenging. And I find it challenging because if you're an individual that hasn't worked out your soul, your purpose, your direction in life, all those kind of things, it can be really hard to determine what that message is to connect with others. And for me, if you haven't worked that out, that's totally okay. It might be just that life stage that you're at where you haven't kind of worked out where you're going, what it is you do. I mean, it wasn't until I was 31, only, 3 short years ago, that I kind of felt comfortable in what it is I was going to do, which was this whole branding thing, to help others develop their brands and show how it was done and communicate what it is I know and try and develop that learning. Yeah, until I was 31. It can take time. So if you haven't really got at least a short-term set in stone understanding of what you have to offer, what your purpose is, where you're going with things, your story, and being comfortable in those shoes to move forward with, to develop something that's identifiable, be it in your message or even then a visual side of things, if it's wearing a certain thing, if it's painting your fingernail, your tone of voice, all those kind of things. It's a hard thing and a complex thing for an objective individual that isn't you to capture everything that you say you think your brand is and then make it something. It is quite difficult. So it's why I kind of not shy away from it, but I just don't think it's something that I can really help with. But look, at the end of the day, if it's wanting to create a logo, by all means I can help guide you through that process and maybe make you something. But if you do want a helping hand in throughout that process of really discovering who it is you are, I can give you a bit of a framework and we can go through that and develop something and help you develop something that you can be, you can walk away comfortably leaning into those things in your life that make you who you are and how you show up then as a result. Now, when do you need to consider this? When do you need to consider personal branding? Now, tomorrow, next week, next year? It's totally up to you. But what I feel that personal branding can do for you is, I talk about a brand as being a captivating moment of connection, to connect with others, be it your consumers or just your audience, others like you, whatever it is. To the act of branding, to develop a brand, I call it to create captivating moments of connection from clarity with your consumers. And that aspect of clarity there is to understand who you're trying to communicate with, understand what you have to offer and what people will want as a result and lean into and want to hear more about or buy into, all those kind of things. I told you there was a lot of S's and C's to come after those D's. Finally came through them. So where I'm going with this is, if you do want to create better and more meaningful connections with your consumers, with your audience, no matter who they are on the business side of things, if you run a business or just you as an individual, if you want to create those better connections, this is going to allow you to help other people connect with you, other people to empathize with you, and you as a result empathize with them once you do connect with them. It's that kind of icebreaker to reveal who you are so that people can understand who you are, and then ask the questions that they want answers to, or then you can ask your questions of them and form a better brand that they can connect with, and you can amplify and get more confidence in who you are. I mean, when I started all this, I didn't have the same kind of verbosity and confidence in showing up and ease with having a camera here, a screen there, and do all these kind of things. I've worked up to this. And over time, when you make more and more connections, everything starts to make a bit more sense. So considering personal branding might not be an intentional effort to begin with. You might just slowly grow it over time. And that's kind of how I feel I've done it, and just tried things along the way and see what feels comfortable. Because I think at the end of the day, if you're considering doing your personal branding, you might feel like you need to change your personality to fit with what people are going to want. I say no. You need to tap into what makes you authentically you. Maybe add an extra 10%, turn it up to 11, zhuzh it up. I don't know any other ways to describe it, but I kind of feel like if I bring my 100%, if I add that extra 10%, it might feel a little forced, but my gosh, it feels that little bit more energetic, a bit more engaging to want to sit up and listen and still tune in. Because I think for me, if I don't feel enthused by watching myself back and I'm like talking like this and just very deadpan and it's a little bit average, I wouldn't want to listen to that. I said I a little too much there. So think about these kind of things. Think about what people are going to want to tune in for. Think about what makes you you and what you're going to feel most confident in showing up there. Because if you want to make an impact on certain people, making these connections can help you make that impact, just that little bit extra, if it's for your business, if it's for yourself, to share these things that you want to share with others, whatever it is, if it's knowledge, if it's entertainment, if it's just to connect with others and learn from one another, all these kind of things. It's a gateway to it. Now, to finish things off, I posed you a question at the start of all of this. I said, what are you going to be most known for? If you haven't answered that by now, that's totally fine. I'm not saying answer it now, but I want to add a final question or two for you to, I guess, consider in finding that clarity and honing in what will make you stand out, at least, so that you can better connect with others. And that question is, how are you going to make it easier for people to connect with you? If you're unsure of what makes you you, because it's a complex ask of yourself to kind of tap into, okay, what do I think makes me me? You ask those that you know. And you ask them and say, what are the first things that come to mind when you think of me? Is it how I look, how I sound, the reason why I show up, or all these different things? Base it on your soul, your sound, and your sight, and then maybe how you show up as well. That could be part of what your personal brand identity becomes, how you show up. And so I'll leave you with this. best of luck. And remember, don't hide behind your logo. Be the person that your consumers want to see and hear. And if you've been watching here on YouTube at all, please consider subscribing. Here it is. Which side is it? There it is right there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Same thing. If you're on a podcast, you can hit the subscribe button on there. Maybe leave a review if you're on Apple Podcasts. But with that, I'm going to leave you until the following, in 2 weeks' time. I'm back with another All About Branding video here. New article, new topic. You can catch all my Instagram content, LinkedIn content, TikTok content. Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.